And then before I introduce today's speaker, I want to thank Raise the Bar Consulting for sponsoring this morning's meeting. Jennifer, thank you so much for supporting AFP Southern Arizona and for everything that you contribute to our fundraising community. And I would like to invite you to say a few words.
Sure. I mean, you are so welcome. I am super excited to be here today and to be sponsoring this event. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Jennifer Tersini. I own and operate Raise the Bar Consulting. We are a team of 7 providing full support for fundraising, organizational development, and transitional leadership interim executive solutions. So happy to help if there's anything you need. I'm just really excited to hear Gugu's presentation and really glad to be here today. Thanks.
Thank you, Jennifer. So Gugulethu Moyo is the director of Jewish History Museum and Holocaust History Center in Tucson. A former attorney, Gugu is a human rights advocate with expertise in press freedom. She was the founding executive director of Media Defense, a London-based legal aid organization dedicated to defending media freedom worldwide. Gugu has served on multiple boards of directors and currently serves on the board of the Council of American Jewish Museums and Child and Family Resources. Today, Gugu will speak about how storytelling and empathy building techniques have become increasingly important to fundraising for the Jewish History Museum. Gugu, thank you so much and welcome.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, everyone, for this invitation. I think I will maybe start by asking for empathy. Going into my presentation, when Sarah and Ori first spoke to me and said, can you do this? It was a while ago, and I was working in a museum with 3 or 4 other employees working with me or co-workers. And today I'm the only full-time employee of the museum, and then have somebody else who works 20 hours. So, I think this is to say, and for me, what I was observing, I'm often observing my own life and history, because I'm working in an environment where we're talking about histories, that history doesn't end. It doesn't stop. And so even as we move in the world, as we do our work, the commitments that we make, sometimes we have to challenge our own selves, or the world challenges our expectations of what it means. That's my husband, sorry, in the background. So I'm gonna move. The world challenges our expectations of what it means to be presenting something. So I had to decide for myself, shall I cancel on everybody, or shall I do what I can with this moment? And whose expectation would I be failing when it comes to presentation, right? What do you expect when you come to a breakfast presentation, and why? So before I begin, talking about fundraising and all of that, I thought I would like to share something with you that for me also provides a quote, which I find so relevant to our discussions about solutions as fundraising professionals, as development people, as not-for-profit executives who are trying to change the world, oftentimes one way or another, and it is a relatively long clip by India RE. And if Ori will share that, I ask you to sit and listen. You invited a DJ to speak, so I'm going to DJ for you this morning. Thank you.
Okay, hold on one.
Ori, can you share it with us? Are you able to?
Hang on one sec.
I am India Ari, and it is my pleasure to be here in the Essence Wellness House for my house. And so what we're going to do together today is called a songversation. So songversation always begins and ends with a prayer about the truth of who we are at our essence and at our core. And this is featuring my new friends, beautiful chorus. This is our prayer. Voices in my head. I am not the pieces of the brokenness inside. I am light. I am light. Yeah. I am light. I am light. Light as in the opposite of heavy. Light as in the best word in the English language to describe the soul. I am light, I am light. I'm not the mistakes that I have made, or any of the things that cause me pain. I am not the pieces of the dreams I left behind. I am light. Quantum physics teaches us that we're really actually mostly space. We are light. I am not the color of my eyes. I am not the skin on the outside. I am not my age. I am not my race. My soul inside is all light. I am light. And fire given off by the combustion of the crucible of life's hard times. I am divinity defined. I am the God on the inside. I am a star, a piece of it all. I am light.
Thank you. So I've never done a presentation with my daughter sitting on my lap. I'm going to try to carry on with this. If there is, I think one thing that this year, this last year has taught us is that, yes, history doesn't change. Sorry, history doesn't end. When we all thought we knew what was going to happen and we're settled in our ways of working, COVID, I think, upended so many things about what we understood about our world, and it revealed to us our vulnerabilities as a society, our vulnerabilities as individuals, and also the things that we didn't know about our own country, our own history, and the experiences of our neighbors. And that has had a dramatic effect on the museum field. I don't work in other fields, but I do not know of a field which has been more shaken than the museum field in its certainty and in its ways of working. So in the past, museum professionals were largely experts, you know, or at least took the stance of experts, and we told, you know, the world what we interpreted, you know, the world for other people. We would tell the stories about objects and tell you this is what it is, and this is what it was used for, and this is why, and that is this is where it came from. Many museums now have found that they have to operate without people coming to see the objects, without coming to see the art. The idea that a museum is something that does not have a space in which you can view and interact with objects and perhaps be tactile in some ways is a new one for many museum professionals. Fortunately for the Jewish History Museum, we were already in a place where we had really abandoned the focus on objects. The Jewish History Museum and Holocaust History Center is an oral history museum. That hasn't always been the case. When it was first established, it was a museum in which, the traditional, I think, idea of a history museum was a museum in which we would tell the stories of Jewish people in this region, how Jewish people came to be in Southern Arizona through the objects that they brought here with them or used in their lives and acquired here. And what the museum has been doing since around about 2000 and I think 15, 16 is tell the stories, tell the same histories through the stories of individuals within the community. We tell the stories of Jewish people, but we also tell the stories of non-Jewish people. And one thing that I think has become very clear in the Jewish History Museum field is that even as we thought we were doing a great job of telling the story of who is Jewish, what is anti-Semitism, why does any of this matter? You know, what have Jews contributed to American society? We thought we were doing a fairly effective job at that. What we realized over this pandemic period is that perhaps not. Many of you would have seen in January, people who went to the Capitol to protest, some of whom went out with hate symbols. People wore Nazi symbols in a public place, and we do not only teach Jewish history, but we teach Holocaust history, right? And the idea that there are people who would be out there wearing, displaying, putting on their bodies, Nazi symbols, I think has come to many of us as a real surprise and an incredible shock. Especially, I think, for those of us who have a sort of global perspective on the ways in which the Holocaust history has been treated. In Germany, for instance, it is completely unacceptable to in any way present a positive light to the Holocaust. In this country, in January, we had an elected congressperson speaking to a crowd of people saying Hitler was right on some point, or at least on the youth and so on. That person is still in elected office in this country. And there have been many surprises like that, and we have had to ask ourselves, well, so how did we fail? Or what haven't we done effectively as storytellers? At the same time, we are also ourselves trying to figure out how to operate a museum when people cannot come to you. We now have to go and find our audiences, and we this Tucson museum was always really a hyper-local museum. We tell a particular story in a particular location, which is unlike any location that I think comparable Jewish museums have, right? So we tell the story of Jewish migration in a place where there are many migrants, right? The Jewish History Museum building is the oldest, the first synagogue that was built in southern Arizona in 1910. It was built before Arizona became a state. What we say or what we acknowledge in all of our material is that we sit on the land of Tohono, the Tohono O'odham people. And that is as far as we go. And then, of course, in our Holocaust History Center, we highlight the genocide of Jewish people. And the question for us at this point, when we're required when we do actually treat the histories and contemporary stories of genocide, the reason we teach Holocaust history is because we hope that this will educate people and do something to prevent the same thing happening again, right? History repeating itself. And that is not necessarily history repeating itself for Jews, but for everybody. One of the outcomes of the Holocaust was that we ended up in this world with a universal declaration of human rights that is enshrined and intended to protect everybody's rights. And yet, as historians, and I think across the field, museums have done an incredibly poor job of telling the story of why it is that we are here in Tucson in a land where there were indigenous people before anybody arrived here from Europe or elsewhere. And yet we do not see indigenous people, and we do not call that genocide, the vanishing of the people who lived here. And we describe our country as a country of immigrants. So we have completely erased, the story of the people who were here, and this is the story we tell ourselves. So what I think really has happened as a result of COVID and the many things that it has revealed about ourselves and who is the voice of authority in our communities, in our spaces, who is running everything, and what are the consequences of that, is that we have to let go of our fixed narratives. We have to rewrite that story and go back and reveal more and more about our histories. And working in the Holocaust history and education field, one thing I know is that every day there is a new story about victims of the Holocaust. Something that we did not know. And if you know Holocaust history and are aware of Holocaust literature, there are hundreds of thousands of books written about the individuals, the individual experiences, and what our what our history museum or our museum has had to grapple with is saying, look, there is nuance in the world, and we do not know everything, and there is no full stop in the story. And in fact, the more that we can nuance the way in which we talk about our work and ourselves, the better it is for everybody. The quicker or the faster we will be at getting to a solution, or at least moving in a direction that is helpful. One of the things that I shared with you, or I shared with Orion, I'd like to share is an Instagram feed that I look at every day. It's called Decolonize Myself. And there is always something in there that is, to me, incredibly challenging. A few days ago, they had a post that said something like, people always come to Native American or Indigenous American people and say, how can we help you? And the question they really should be asking is, how can we help you, right? As in, how can Indigenous Americans help us? And I think this is where the work is going when it comes to development work. I have worked on both sides of the equation as a funder, a grant maker, and also, of course, as a fundraiser. And at this point, the museum depends on charitable funds. One of the things that I think is challenging and that we struggle with as the development professionals and funders is that we fix our narratives about the world and what the solutions are, and we're all still saying, well, we're going to go back to this situation and we're going to do this and we have all the answers. But it was quite clear, there's nothing more clear, I think. Everything else is uncertain, but the one thing that has been clear is that we do not know what's going to happen next. When we shut down for COVID in March last year, many of us thought this is going to be a month and we're going to be over and out and so on. A year later, we are still not open as a museum. I don't know how many of you have gone back to your business spaces and are open. I think many of you are working from home. For so long, we thought that we couldn't work from home. We now know that we can, and we can work with our children on our laps, and a presentation doesn't have to be perfect. So if I'm invited here and things have gone wrong in my life, including that last week, I was out running in Tucson and encountered somebody in my neighborhood who thought I shouldn't be there. My neighbor was white. I am dark brown, as you can see. And that was a traumatic experience, frightening for me. I won't go into the details right now. But in so many ways, I am shaken right now. At the same time, I still think I have something to say and a story to tell to you, and this is why I am here, right? And the story is the story that we as museum professionals we have learned is that we need to be comfortable with shifting the narrative and shifting roles. Often funders come because of the power. I think that money sometimes, grants to us, saying, well, we need this from you, and you need to show it like this, and deliver your impact. Tell us what your impact is. Tell us how you're going to execute this in a year, or 3 years from now. If you're writing a grant, those 3-year grants, I don't know why they still exist right now and who can get them unless you're getting a core grant, right? Just to support your work, because really no one can predict what is going to happen next month, let alone 3 months from now. And we need to be comfortable giving money in that situation. We also need to be more capable of telling the story of how things have changed and being more honest about it. Rather than saying, hey, we've got it all together and we're going to push through. We're keeping it going, don't worry. Despite COVID, this nonprofit is still delivering and saving people like we used to. I think we need to tell, more complex, more perhaps truthful stories about the work of changing the world, and just how little we know, and how much of what we see in the world and what we say about the world is really shaped by a narrow perspective of what the world is like and how people experience the world. You do not know my experience, and neither do I know yours. One of the things that we're doing at the Jewish History Museum is, this is Jewish museums more broadly have had to reckon with this, is that we were not telling the story very well of who Jewish people were and what Jewish people looked like, right? If you go to most Jewish museums, we tell stories through images and, images a lot, I think, in museums. and voices and names. You know, there are many things that identify people or are markers for Jewishness. And in many ways, museums have played a role in fixing those narratives, in fixing those stereotypes of what Jewish people are like, because we have told, you know, we've flattened the story and told the story of somebody who is representative, right? Rather than accepting that, you know, actually this is complicated and no one person is representative of the whole. And that knowing and understanding that there are different stories and there is a lot of nuance in the world is something that is important and something that I think will help us move to a point where we're actually more able to solve the problems that we need to do. I think often of you know, Jewish experience and how Jews will say, well, we are you know, we are people of the book. We learn. We're adaptable, and there is a stereotype of Jewish people, I think, being incredibly. There is the idea of the Jewish mind, you know, in intelligence and resilience. I see that as a form of expertise, right? The reason why Jewish people, you know, when I hear the stories, the reason, in my mind, one of the reasons why, you know, Jewish people are particularly effective at doing various things, starting afresh and so on, is because they have had to, right? That is the Jewish experience of moving, you know, moving from one place where you thought your life was whole and you knew what was happening, and finding yourself in another place with nothing. That is the story of the Holocaust. If you survived, you started again with nothing. None of the people that were familiar to you, none of the places, nothing. But it is possible to start again, you know, for the world to be flat and flattened, and we start again. And I think that we need to be rethinking the way, you know, the way in which we are still holding on to our fixed narratives. In the next month, the museum, the Jewish History Museum, will host a discussion with a international correspondent by the name of Michaela Wrong, who's just published a book about Rwanda called Do Not Disturb. So those of you who know of Rwanda, I guess, will probably have heard that, you know, there was a genocide in Rwanda, and after that there was a truth and reconciliation process, and everything has been good since then. And that story is one that has been crafted over time by you know, many storytellers, most of them journalists. But one of the things that is interesting about Rwanda is that Rwanda has more museums per capita than any other country in the world. And Michaela Wrong, who has spent so many years of her life reporting, you know, various situations, mostly in Africa, in the most dangerous places in the world, in the Congo and Eritrea, turned her attentions to Rwanda, and has now really written the story of how long it took her to change her mind and tell the story of what Rwanda is now, which is that, well, yes, there was this leader, Paul Kagame, the leader who took over after the genocide, who provided some healing, but he is now authoritarian, dealing ruthlessly with his opponents. He has been in power since 1994, and there is no plan for him to leave. Nonetheless, people still call Rwanda a democracy. I certainly never thought of Rwanda as you know, lovely and great place, because in the 2000s, close to 2010, I worked I ran a legal aid fund for journalists. And what we did was pay for lawyers to represent journalists who were arrested for their reporting. Rwanda had among the highest number of cases. People were not able to report the truth about what was going on when we were being locked up. Kagame's opponents generally are just assassinated, right? But there is this a world that is committed to saying that, particularly because people feel, I think, the guilt that they did not do anything. They did not intervene in Rwanda when there was a genocide. We said never again after the Holocaust. And here we were ignoring or not acting soon enough to save lives in Rwanda. So we are all committed to telling the story of, happily ever after. And so it has been difficult right now to reckon with the fact that Rwanda, there are many people right now in Rwanda who are subject to or victims of human rights abuses. And Paul Kagame is not being held accountable in the international human rights system because we are all committed to this narrative. And one of the things that was interesting with all the reviews, this book has been reviewed in The Economist and the New York Times and the Council for Foreign Relations and so on and so on. Most of the reviews, and there was a headline from Reuters saying, well, it was something to the idea, something to the effect that this was breaking news, the real story of Rwanda, the new real story of Rwanda. And I said to Michaela when we were speaking, I said, but whose perspective is that? From the perspective of those who were victims of Kagame's regime from the start, Rwanda has not been a place of healing and a good story. And so sometimes, and often what we're learning is that it's because the things that we don't know is because we are looking to certain experts and limiting the range of people who can tell the story of what it is. We are committed to certain narratives, and in the nonprofit world, the commitment is usually to the idea that we will continue to serve people, and we're doing so effectively, and we're meeting their needs, and we know what their needs are even before we have spoken to them sometimes, right? Even at this point when we're not able to reach people and know what has changed about their lives, what they want out of a museum, what they want out of any other situation, we are still saying that we know to our donors, right? Because everybody is committed to the idea of knowing and being the professionals and the experts, even though this time has shown us that the experts or the so-called experts, the so-called voices of authority, often did not know what they were doing. And I think Anthony Fauci, though, is to me my hero because he not only has led an organization and a public health system through COVID, but HIV, if any of you remember that, I lived through HIV in Zimbabwe and AIDS, when people talk about unprecedented things and situations and the numbers of people dying and no cure and so on. I do not think of this as unprecedented because I remember the experience that we had in Africa, Southern Africa, with HIV. But Anthony Fauci has been willing to say, look, there's this that we can do in the short term to move things forward, but we do not know a great deal, and there is a lot that we do not know, and to update as we go. And I think with our conversations with donors as development people, we need to be able to structure our conversations like that, our grant writing, our fundraising that way, to say, look, we are taking your money or would like to take your money, but we do not know exactly if we will be able to do this thing. We had programs where we were training the police. We took money from somebody who wanted this special training to be done. This donor then came back and said, well, I want my money back because you're no longer doing that work. And we had to say, well, are you interested in doing this work, or, you know, just, you know, kind of, having your way, as it were, satisfying yourself that you have done something about a situation. Because if you want this work to happen, please be patient. Let us keep your money until such a time as we can have police cadets coming to the museum to learn about the Holocaust and the role of law enforcement agencies. We cannot do that right now, but you are stressing us out as a small institution by insisting that we should try to do this thing because you gave us money. We have made a commitment to you, right? And sometimes, you know, and many times, I think we should be able to shift our commitments and to shift our ideas about what it means to deliver in a situation. And I think, you know, for me, that's I'm presenting something for us to think about. I'm not, as you can see, with answers, I'm saying, you know, we should be asking ourselves the right questions and willing to admit that we do not know. And, you know, would like to have a conversation with you about your own experiences during this period, how things have changed in your conversations or not, and how you might like them to change. And I think one of the biggest parts of our work as fundraisers is to try to get our donors together to understand also that while they see we are doing a one-on-one with them, right? They do not see that we are often reporting to several other donors who are wanting the same thing, but slightly differently, right? You know, everybody has their own reporting requirements, and you know, the reporting deadlines and timeframes are often differ. We as fundraisers also need, I think, to do the work of bringing together our donors and saying, look, this is the bigger picture that you don't see. How can we make sure we keep you all informed about what we're doing without necessarily having to do or replicate and you know, repeat certain elements of our work in an environment where we are already strained, just so we can meet your requirements for paperwork. And to have the empathy, I think, to understand that the donors too have their own pressures. They're often the people who are your grant, you know, the people you're reporting to for grants and so on, have been taught this is what you need to get from your, you know, charity before you can approve. And, you know, these boxes, tick these boxes, this is what you have to do. So there are pressures for them to tick all those boxes. And we also need to have that conversation, which is donors are not always helping us. How can we help them? You know, how can we, you know, what are they really trying to achieve with those particular reporting formats, you know, and how can we meet your need without necessarily, you know, straining ourselves and limiting our ability to do the real work, right? Which I think for many of us, the real work is engaging with people who are not the donors, people who are not the fundraisers, and whose priorities and needs are very, you know, more immediate and quite different from our own. So I think I will leave it at that. But yeah, how do we tell those stories? You know, at museums we use photographs, we use voices, we use objects. We've had to change. We one thing that is new in the museum field is we are now, certainly the Jewish, sorry, not just the Jewish field. We're about to start a public education campaign on COVID and rather vaccine hesitance, right? And you know, for many people, you would say, well, why would museums be engaging in anything of the sort? but we, somebody in the museum field who is somewhat of a visionary and a genius said, well, we're not going to be open until it is safe for everybody to be out there. And so this is museum business. We also know from the research that the public trusts museums. You know, we are probably more trusted, or we used to be, more trusted than journalists. You know, there was this idea that by the time something got into a museum, the story was fixed, right? And we had checked all our sources. So we are at least in a position to use that trust to encourage people to those who have doubts and do not are misinformed about you know what it means to vaccinate and why it is necessary to rethink, you know, to be educated about you know why this is important, and you know, this is in the interest of museums. You know, our funders, on the other hand, would be saying, well, this is mission creep, right? What are you doing? And we have to be able to tell the more complicated story that until and unless we have people comfortable and safe going to work again and going to museums, you know, in crowded public spaces again, or maybe not, you know, because maybe that is not a good idea to go back to. But until we have at least addressed the immediate problem of COVID, we cannot really begin to tell the story of history, because we're not going to reach those people anymore. So our work and our priorities do have to shift and change. And in that process of agreeing, we have to recognize that there is no single, you know, there is some danger, as Chimamanda Ngozi says, of a single story. And we all in this field have a single story. We're told to do our, what's your 3-minute, your pitch, your elevator pitch on what your organization does. If you can't tell it, you're going to, you know, you're not an effective speaker. You're not an effective fundraiser. If you add layers, you know, we have to be willing to add layers. We have to be willing to hear that there are layers and nuances, and also able, I think, to communicate that there is always more to the story, if only we had enough time to tell it all. So, you know, thank you very much for inviting me here, and let's talk, ask conversations. I would love to hear from other people rather than speak about what has changed in your world. What are the fixed narratives that you've had to grapple with?
Ooh, can we open it up for questions now?
Mm-hmm.
Awesome, thank you. Who has questions? We can use the raise hand feature, or feel free to unmute yourself and take the floor.
I have a comment more so than a question and a thank you, Gugu. I think it is so, I loved what you said about, you know, we have to sort of teach donors how to be more helpful, you know, like, I think getting them together and talking about, you know, how they might fit into the puzzle, but they're not owning the puzzle. You know, there's a lot that's going on. And I think it speaks also to sort of demanding unrestricted funds whenever you can, like support the mission. This is the dollars we need to do the mission, and we will execute the mission, you know, or the purpose, as someone said in the chat box. You know, if you can't stay open at all, very few people are going to learn about the history, the Jewish history and Holocaust museums, right? Like, so I just really appreciate you sort of bolstering that idea of, you know, we like in life, you know, we just have to educate them about what it is, how they can be helpful. And sometimes I think we have to say no to money that's going to be more of a hindrance than a help. And I think we have to be empowered enough to do that. So thank you.
Thank you, Debbie. I can't see. Sarah, do you have?
Looks like Eva's got her hand up.
Okay.
Hi. Yeah, I just started reading this great article about putting purpose above mission. I put a link to it in the chat. The 4 principles of purpose-driven board leadership. And I think it really dovetails very nicely with what we're talking about this morning. You know, I think that we've really looked to our mission to be our true north. And after everything that's happened in the past year, we have to go even deeper. We can't be content to stay at the level of the mission that we, you know, set up before, right? Who knows how long ago? We have to go deeper to the purpose of why we're actually doing what we're doing. Go back to the why, revisit the why, go deeper into the purpose. And I think that, you know, people should be more open to that now, right? I think that if we can invite people who maybe are hung up on the mission to, you know, tell them like, look, that is a good mission. It's a mission we established, but why did we establish that mission? And how have things changed? And how can we get to the purpose, the heart of our society, our role and our responsibility to each other? You know, that's a deeper level. And I think it's something that that all of these issues that we've had to confront as a society have brought us to. So this really resonates with me, and I'm really, really happy to have heard your presentation this morning, Gugu. I know you were feeling like maybe it wasn't what you wanted it to be, but I think it was exactly what we had to hear. So thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Gugu. Thank you very much for the presentation. You mentioned, and I don't have the exact words, but you said something to the effect that in light of everything that's happened in the past year with white supremacy, I'm assuming, where did we fail? And that's something I thought about over the past year as I see these events unfold, is it seemed that having lived through many of the civil rights movements and participating, it's very discouraging to see that people still harbor these feelings. What can we do? You know, what is the museum community talking about doing to help?
Yeah. I think that for me, it's rethinking where we look for expertise, right? It is still the default of people to go back to the people who have already failed. And I don't think that this is you know, this idea of failure. You know, I'm using a different language that is not my own. English is my third language. But I think we have to be also nuanced in our ideas of failure and not see that or acknowledging failure as a weakness. We are in a culture that is often very masculine, very much about, you know, the sort of frontier pioneer culture where I know I'm going into this territory and I know what I'm going to do, and look how brave the man who knows and clears the path for all of us, right, who arrived here and found this place. You know, look, we followed, and look what we have now. Looking to those who have the expertise, or rethinking who our voices of authority is really important, right? So for many people, even though they say, well, we want to know what we did or did not do wrong with white supremacy and racism in this country, why are we still so racist? Still very much are not necessarily listening to those people who have the best experience of what it means to be racist. The voices of authority are not in this situation, are not being heard. I work, like, as you know, in a Holocaust History Center. We do not challenge the accounts of Holocaust survivors, right? In fact, I think that doing that is, in certain respects, against the law, right? And it is Holocaust denial, right? Because at some point, somebody must have understood that there is a purpose in allowing those people with a minority experience to have their say in society, right? And not telling the history through the voices of authority who will erase and distort their own roles. And Holocaust history is a great example of that, where we let people speak for themselves. Our industry is based on bringing Holocaust survivors to tell their own stories, their own individual stories, and that connects with people. It builds the empathy. People who come and say this never happened find it very difficult to deny when they're speaking to somebody who now lives in Tucson, who said, this happened, this really happened to me. And this is how it happened. And here are the photographs, by the way. I was hidden in somebody's home, or this is what I looked like, when I was freed. And this is what I looked like when I arrived in America. You can come and see me now at my new home. This is my new family. This was my old family, It is very hard to deny. But if I am the one who tells you, that version myself, and says, well, this is what happened, we can challenge each other, and we will hone down on, somebody will narrow down on a mistake that I have made. Right, and say, well, you're not the expert on this, and we will argue about it. And that, I think, is true of racism in this country, that it continues to be something that people debate. And they simply do not listen to the people who have the expertise on the subject matter. The people who are considered to be unreliable narrators of their own experience, right? And have always been. And that's what is challenging now for museums. We are looking at this and saying, our experts don't know how to tell the story because they don't know the story. So can we make space? Can we hold space for somebody else to tell the story? That is what an oral history museum does. We don't. It is an endless space. We collect so many stories, thousands of stories, and build archives, because we are saying everybody's story matters and it adds to the big picture. It is valuable, right? And we are not going to determine, whose story is more important. That is true also from my experience in the world of human rights. We do not compare violations, human rights activists. We do not say, well, it is better to be, killed in Rwanda than to be, to have your speech suppressed or something, because we understand, I think, that, for us to avoid the situation where we all collapse and really suffer a loss of empathy. This is what happened in Germany, right? It was a society where people, at some point, the vast majority of the people in the society lacked empathy. They stopped listening to the people involved. They stopped even seeing them as human, right? And we have to relearn empathy in the society, right? Stop listening only to the voice of authority, and understand why we call those people voices of authority. Is that because that's what we have been taught? That the one who wrote the book, the one who had time to write the book, is the one who knows the subject matter better than the person who has experienced the matter itself. We all know this. Those who have given birth will tell you that there is no way that you can even begin to describe what it means. And the way I have given birth is different from the way the next person who gave birth experienced that. And we need to be comfortable with knowledge. Professionalism often teaches us to come and have all the answers, right? And to disregard those people who challenge our narratives and say, well, the majority opinion is this, right? And in doing that, we really expose ourselves to the real danger, which is a loss of empathy and understanding of the world. And I think that is how we got here. We're still here. We're still not listening to people who have experienced racism in this country. And the consequence, African Americans will tell you, is if only people had listened to us, you all wouldn't be suffering. There's a community who tells a story that says, well, oh, now it's all equal opportunity suffering in this country for once. Because when we were saying these things are happening to us, no one was paying attention, all right? And as we speak, we live in the desert. The people who have been here longer than any of us who have survived in this hostile environment, live in I try to use the word ghettos, but they do not live in spaces where we have the opportunity to learn from them. And one of the things, again, is also language, the assumptions that we make about language, that everything must be translated to English for us. I don't know what your first language is, but I'm betting there's a lot of nuance to how you ended up speaking that language, which has not everything to do with your own history, and the history of your all your ancestors, right? But we have, as a global community, embraced a few languages and said, these are the ones by which we will tell all our stories, right? And because of that, we will not be able to hear the stories of the Tohono O'odham people, just changing our way of working. So we let people communicate with us too, and not talk to them, and give allowance for the fact that you really do not understand when you don't understand what someone is saying to you. And that person could really be able to save your life. And you will spend a lot of time trying to find answers for yourself. There is this culture as well that is like, I am not going to listen to anybody else. I'm going to find out for myself. I'm going to research this, particularly if this is coming from a culture where I've been told there is nothing to learn from that culture. But I think, if I'm correct, many Americans have, while they're sitting at home, watched more television and read more news, and understood that not everything that happens here is better than as it happens elsewhere in the world. Even though the fixed narrative, the narrative that has been crafted through our history lessons, has always been, this is the greatest democracy in the world, the greatest system for every human being. There is no other better system. I assure you, there are better places to live if you're African American or of skin that looks like mine. I can assure you there are other places in the world. So it depends on your perspective. It depends on whose narrative we are listening to, right?
Thank you. And I want to put a plug in for the museum. If anyone has not been to the Jewish History Museum, it's on Stone Avenue, just north of 17th Street. And it's remarkable.
Thank you. Yeah, we are a virtual museum now, and we don't have the dates yet for Michaela Wrong's talk, but I encourage you to come, because she has been a storyteller for longer than most people I know, and is an incredible war reporter, war correspondent, as it were. And her whole story is about is also about a culture of lying in Rwanda, how lying is a value. If you're transparent, you're actually not very good, right? And so Western are coming into this situation, assuming with Western values that, you know, people must tell you the truth, and lying is a problem, you know. You know, and this is the system in which we're all working, or this is the language we're all working with. Then we'll discover after decades that you know, you're actually dealing with people who for whom, you know, outwitting you and not revealing the story to you was important for their own, the survival of their own story and their own culture. So yes, you know, let's be careful of the things we cannot see and do not know, and maybe stick with the story a lot longer, and just be patient as to how much we can possibly learn about a situation in a limited amount of time. I think also we like to collapse things into very brief periods, but you know, history doesn't end. It really doesn't. It doesn't stop. We're not here yet. That's last year we've understood America isn't here. We're not there.
I just want to draw attention. We are at our time, so I know other people might have meetings. We can certainly keep the room open if people want to continue to talk, but I don't know, Gugu, if you need to go or if you could take a couple more questions. I know we've had some hands go up.
I can take questions.
Jenny, do you want to go ahead?
Sure. I hope I formulate a question as I get to the end of what I'm thinking, but this is just such a fascinating conversation to a whole group of fundraisers who work for nonprofits, who serve clients, whose stories we want to tell and are so important to tell. But I can say it sometimes feels like we're adding an extra burden to a client to ask them to tell us their story so we can tell their story. So then we can get the world to understand how dysfunctional the world is and how unfair it is for certain groups of people. And so I just wonder about, you know, the approach for those of us that work, you know, we're like on the higher end of the chain of a nonprofit organization, right, as fundraisers. And then we have case managers who are working more deeply with individuals who are maybe in crisis, who need support from our community, our larger community. But the idea of getting their story from them to share out as, I dare say, a marketing piece is it's just such a challenging cycle in the nonprofit industry that it's really hard to wrap your head around when we're talking from this perspective, because we want to educate, especially, you know, we're fundraisers, right? So we want to educate those that have financial capacity to do the right thing and do the good work. But in order to do that, we have to re-traumatize someone because we want to tell their story so that people get that people are going through traumatic situations. So it's just a really, it's yet another system that we're all working within, that all of us have the deepest heart for the people that we're working for. But it's just such an interesting thing to think about. And so, Gugu, I don't know if you have any kind of thoughts around how you can tell a story without re-traumatizing someone, how you might approach someone and share how important it is that they share their story. It's just a really interesting piece of nonprofit work that I think about a lot.
I don't have an answer, but I think that part of what we have to learn is to not want to control the narrative, right? To see how we may support people to tell their own stories. The idea that everybody needs a translator, right? And that you are the appropriate translator, that you have the skills to translate and communicate the traumas is problematic in itself, right? Finding out, we know from doing Holocaust history education that traumatized people sometimes find their power and their healing by telling their stories, right? Making their story mean something to the world. or just telling their story, having somebody hear them for the first time without interrupting them. And even if it is not a slick presentation or the one that we would like, what we do is we like to can it, right? We want to do the 3-minute pitch. We want to condense somebody's trauma into a bite because we have very low expectations of what other people, our audiences can comprehend, right? And we have a very high expectations of our own or a high sense of our own capacity to communicate the stories of others. And somewhere in between, we need to find a way to work with each other in ways that are comfortable. If someone can tell their stories through their art, we do that at the museum. If someone can tell a story through a song, we do that. It does not have to be the presentation, the PowerPoint, or whatever it is, and the perfect quote. The job of building empathy is to get people to exercise those empathy muscles, to sit with the discomfort of not understanding. That helps you, I think, to grow, right? To be more capable. It is empowering to be reminded that you're not capable of everything, because I think it allows you room to actually grow and expand your understanding of the world. And I think that's what most of us want, I hope, to do at the very basic, right? Why we're here. So yeah, I mean, I don't have an answer other than like why do we feel the need to do it? To tell other people's stories. Can we let them tell the stories and facilitate that instead? Can we translate? The other way around. Can we really empower those people and ask them, could you tell the story and how could you do it? And not be afraid that when somebody tells their story, they're going to say something to a donor that you would rather the donor didn't hear, which is you didn't do a perfect job, right? Because part of doing a good job is being able to learn that, this is how you might be able to improve it. But the reason sometimes we interpret other stories is because we are committed to telling the good story, about the positive story about what we did. And donors are also sometimes committed to showing how well they're doing with their money. And again, also want that good story, right? And on both sides, we have to allow for failure and learning and unlearning. This is where we are, unlearning a lot is what we need to do right now.
Thank you. Thank you.
Gugu, thank you so much. I am going to be thinking a lot about how to be more vulnerable in my own storytelling when it comes to communicating with the donor that I interact with. And just the idea of not being afraid to discuss the big picture in front of multiple people, and how we can get our donors to understand this. And I'm going to be thinking about that a lot. And thank you so much. This was a wonderful presentation, and I'm so grateful to you for sharing. Don't know if anyone else has anything else to say, but I'm happy to see all of you, and thank you. We will share these resources in our next newsletter and on our Facebook page, and please don't be afraid to reach out and ask further questions about these topics that came up today. I want to keep this conversation going. This is really important. Thank you all.